Is it Halloween?
Hi. I'm Batman.
What better way of celebrating Michael Keaton's return to the cape and cowl in the upcoming Flash movie than by taking a look back at his Batman legacy thus far? Michael Keaton is one of the most beloved Batman to have ever donned the cape and cowl. For a lot of people, he didn't just play Batman, he was Batman. Despite not having played the part in decades, and gone on to have a stellar career with various top-notch performances in many other movies, and despite many other talented actors coming in to fill in the role, it's still probably Michael Keaton who is most often associated with the character.
Hey, who's Batman to you? Like, when you think of Batman, who's Batman?
I'm Batman.
Michael Keaton is Batman to me.
How can you put Michael Keaton in front of Christian Bale?
Beetlejuice can't be Batman.
No, Michael Keaton is Batman.
No, Ben Affleck is Batman.
Michael Keaton should be eating a bud.
Is it any way you could maybe say it?
No.
Please?
No.
Will you play Batman with us, Michael Keaton? Oh, boy, no.
Batman.
Perhaps a spot he shares with Christian Bale. Before he got the role, Michael Keaton was already a made man, a tried and true celebrity, but I think it's this particular performance that really cemented his legacy. This is the part that ensured that not only is Michael Keaton a thing now, but he will forever be a thing. He's in the history books. Now, first things first, before I go on to gush about how beloved this Batman is, I feel the need to acknowledge that this wasn't always the case. Actually, when Michael Keaton was first cast in the role, the studio faced immediate backlash. What is now celebrated was once boycotted. After the casting, Warner Brothers was bombarded with angry letters from fans expressing their concerns in the most impolite of ways. Fans felt that Michael Keaton was too physically underwhelming for the role, which is funny because I don't remember Sir Adam West being a beefcake himself. Simply put, people didn't want to see Mr. Mom destroy the legacy of Batman. You know, that legacy that hadn't really translated past the comic books at the time. I mean, this may be a hot take, but I don't think it really should be. Batman in the general public was pretty much a joke before Michael Keaton put on the cowl, at least in terms of on-screen adaptation. I mean, Adam West was great, a living legend who is unfortunately no longer living, but Adam West's Batman was almost satire. He was a pleasant parody, and the Batman brand hadn't really evolved past that. Sure, there were other versions of the character out at the time, but they all played off the tropes that were created by Adam West and the Golden Age Batman. But what's really interesting is that on paper, if you looked at Keaton's resume up until that point in time, you wouldn't necessarily know that he had the chops. He was in fact mostly a comedy actor. And while he was fantastic in all that he did, this particular character was so far removed from anything he had previously done. But then again, so was Beetlejuice that came out the year before, and Keaton knocked that one out of the park. Well, luckily, in a short amount of time, lightning would strike twice. And needless to say, the naysayers were made fools of when Tim Burton's Batman was finally released. Not only was the movie a hit, but one of the most praised aspects of the movie Batman was, of course, its titular character. The role may have been outside his resume, but it clearly wasn't outside his range. He wowed audiences and won over many of those who doubted him, not only succeeding as a valid version of Batman, but for many becoming the absolute definitive version of this character. The movie is a must-see cape classic, due in no small part to the brilliant performance put in by Michael Keaton, a role that has set the character on his current path today. Keaton was the blueprint, the starting point for the darker turn within the character. Even if Michael Keaton isn't your favorite Batman, the chances are that he was vital within the creation of your favorite Batman. I think there are really a lot of nuances that are easy to overlook just because there's so much to love on the surface. We have never gotten another Batman like him, and quite frankly, I don't think we ever will. But I think that's also part of what makes it so special, is that this was a once-in-a-lifetime performance. This is something that is often emulated but could never truly be duplicated. What I've always appreciated from Michael Keaton's time in the role was the separation of Bruce and Batman. It's really interesting because this iteration of the character's dual identities are differentiated completely differently than any other interpretation. True, this Bruce Wayne never really develops a larger-than-life socialite persona, and whether he's masked or unmasked, he still stays in shadow. Even at gatherings or social events he hosts, he acts like the perfect wallflower, blending into his surroundings seamlessly. Despite being a local celebrity, he was still virtually unknown and unrecognizable to Gothamites because of how little had ever been seen of him. We're not talking about somebody who doesn't like making waves. We're talking about somebody who practically doesn't produce puddles. As opposed to the split of person and persona, these movies offer a split between man and myth. Batman doesn't feel like a separate identity to Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne doesn't feel like a facade for Batman. It's kind of hard to articulate. The character feels consistent all throughout, but it's almost as if Batman is just the summation of the darkest parts of Bruce Wayne. In the 1989 Batman movie, Batman is publicly thought of as an urban legend. He's spoken of in passing, and just about everyone's heard of him, but not many have seen him. Those who have encountered the Dark Knight aren't exactly law-abiding citizens, so they're not thought to be reliable narrators. Local law enforcement disregards the suspicions and treats him like a tall tale, but he's still real enough to scare the superstitious, cowardly lot that is the criminals of the underworld. Not every criminal is a believer, but his reputation is frightening enough to cause some cold-hearted thugs to spend their time looking over their shoulders. We see how Batman builds the brand. Every action he takes seems statistically calculated. Sure, all these action shots we see of the Dark Knight in action are phenomenal with or without context. The visuals these movies offer up really add to the overall mystique that this character embodies. However, I think it goes a little bit further than just being awesome in appearance. The surreal and otherworldly way the character moves around, the way that he presents himself, typically hidden under a veil of smoke or from within the shadow. I don't think any of this was done by mistake either. Every aspect of this is a well-constructed attempt at creating a monster that preys on the violent and serves the vulnerable. The theatrical way he goes about all that he does, it's all made to not only serve the audience, but to serve the narrative as well. This wasn't just all done for our benefits at home. Batman doesn't move about and do what he does just because it looks cool. These over-the-top entrances he makes are made to make an impression. Bruce is intentionally trying to strike fear in the hearts of the criminal underground of Gotham City, which is why he demands that those he apprehends warn their circles about him, continuing to spread the word of the Caped Crusader, becoming a symbol of fear. I like this because it shows how deep the fight against crime goes for this Batman. He's not only trying to stop current criminals, he's also actively trying to dissuade other potential criminals through fear. Everything about the way this Batman acts, from the slight alteration in his voice when he puts on the mask, to his borderline bizarre, somewhat supernatural mannerisms as Gotham's guardian. I mean, granted, a lot of his movements may also have been stifled and unnatural looking because of just how confining that suit really was. But even if there was some additional, unintentional, stilted strangeness, I think it does more to add to the character rather than take away. There's a natural intimidation factor present with this big screen Batman. He's consistently calm, cool, and collected, even in moments where he probably shouldn't be. In the face of chaos, he remains visibly unchanged. He meets danger head-on and never once breaks eye contact. His presence alone is enough to truly terrify wrongdoers, and rightfully so. He speaks as if his words are absolute certainties, as if what he's saying is simply a matter of fact, no matter what it is that he's saying. This is a Batman who doesn't offer up threats, but instead promises and warnings. Never once does it feel like this personality is put on. It feels far too fluent for it to be an act. He's a shadow in a city full of people, an unknown watchful eye lurking over the city for protection, a silent silhouette ready to save victims and stop victimizers. Batman is very much a myth. Though in that same sense, Bruce Wayne himself is almost just as much of an urban legend. He's a stranger to the society that he protects. He spends most of his days locked away from the very same civilization that he spent his nights protecting, missing public events he's scheduled to attend and departing the few parties he throws early. Bruce doesn't have much of a public image. He's definitely a notable name, but there's not really a face accompanying that name. He's a ghost amongst the living. Whereas later variants of the character would make it seem as if Bruce intended on distancing himself from the world around him, Tim Burton's Batman makes it feel as if that all happened by happenstance. Bruce doesn't mean to put the world on the back burner, it's just that he overly prioritizes his quest for justice, devoting the vast majority of his time to stopping crime and saving lives any way he can. His passion for doing what's right is constantly on display, and it comes across with every action and micro-action he takes. When this Bruce Wayne does attempt to have a social life, it doesn't feel like it's always for the sole purpose of acquiring intel. He does attempt to have friendships of sorts and pursue relationships. What I love about this is that it shows that being Batman doesn't stop Bruce Wayne from being a man. While Keaton's Bruce is still chock full of his signature stoicism, it doesn't come at the expense of other personality traits. Keaton is almost consistently serious and somewhat stern, but these movies don't make the character monotone or one note. He's not some stick in the mud who can't enjoy a laugh. And I enjoy that aspect of this portrayal because it makes Bruce feel more like a human being than a comic book character. Don't get me wrong, I love Batman. Clearly, look at this channel. Sometimes it feels like the character is written into such extremes that it could come across like self-parody. But I think Tim Burton and Michael Keaton did everything just right. They towed the line in such a way that it made Keaton identifiable as Batman, but it didn't necessarily hold him down to the idea of just being Batman. They did everything, and they never once overdid anything. They told you enough about the character, but they never took it too far. Whereas a lot of Bruce Waynes are depicted as being secluded, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's the case for this one. There's certainly an element of that, but he comes across less like a recluse and more just like a private person. This Batman wasn't a prisoner to his sadness. He was a survivor of his suffering. It's kind of beautiful because we see a man who has these issues, but he's not just the sum of these issues. There is much more to Bruce Wayne than problems. He's a person. Or, at the very least, here he's making an effort to be one. Bruce is enjoying life to the best of his abilities. The only problem is that there's no utility belt for his personal life. As Bruce, he can come off as effortlessly likable, but in actuality, it's probably quite effortful for a man who'd prefer to walk on city rooftops rather than city streets. Now, in contrast to his stonewall nature as Batman, as Bruce, he could at times come off as a little bit goofy or absent-minded. And he's not above losing his cool and having an occasional outburst from time to time. And yet, despite how conflicting this may sound, it never feels that way. As a matter of fact, it feels very coherent. He never does anything that feels unwarranted, and all these elements combine to flesh Bruce out and make him feel more like a man than a 2D cartoon character. Christopher Nolan did his best to make the world of Batman feel like the real world in the Dark Knight series, and he did a truly incredible job that deserves to be commended. However, Tim Burton did his best to make Batman feel like a real person living in the world of Batman. And for me, I think that makes for a much stronger iteration. More than anything else, I think Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne comes off as sincere. He's an imperfect but perfectly pleasant person who means well but isn't immune to screwing up. He's a good guy, but he's not the best guy. When it comes to his personal life, he makes mistakes. What's really interesting is that this doesn't feel like a Bruce Wayne who's just learning how to be Batman. In a lot of ways, it feels like a Batman who's just learning to be Bruce Wayne. There's an awkwardness that comes across in every interaction he has. Whether he's flustered by the attention of a beautiful blonde, or just getting ruffled in his standard day-to-day conversation, he seems so much more uncertain of himself as Bruce than he does as Batman. Even when he's concerned, this Batman approaches every situation with the utmost confidence, sometimes to a fault. It's clear that this man's comfort zone lies within the Batcave, and the second that cowl comes off, he's every bit as confused and clueless as everyone else. Michael Keaton did a really good job of making Bruce Wayne feel like an ordinary guy, which is no easy feat. The guy's one of the most iconic vigilantes of all time, and when he's not out fighting crime, he's one of the most famous fictional billionaires of all time. It's incredible how, despite all of that, Michael Keaton and Tim Burton were able to make Bruce Wayne come across as an everyday average Joe. Somehow they managed to make the extraordinary look extraordinary. Michael Keaton managed to make Batman feel larger than life, while making Bruce Wayne feel down to earth. And he did so while managing to make both of these sides feel one and the same, two sides of the same story, that when put together reveal the whole picture. These movies don't really showcase any extreme dysfunction one side of the character causes the other. I think if anything, more than in any other case, Bruce and Batman function and operate pretty fluidly in this. I mean, yeah, he definitely does hit a couple of speed bumps in his relationships, usually brought on by his nighttime extracurricular activities, but even then so, it doesn't feel like it takes that much of a toll on that aspect of his life. The endless hours, the sleepless nights, and a never-ending mission for an ultimately unattainable goal are probably bigger downsides, drawbacks, and obstacles of his chosen career path. The trauma from witnessing his parents' demise at such an early age clearly has taken a toll on his development. It's a sore subject that he doesn't really bring up, but constantly reflects on. Rereading old newspaper clippings from the event, leaving roses in the alley in which they died. Those parents aren't often spoken of, they're silently impactful in a couple of different ways. Bruce seems forever changed and unwell. He's not on the verge of psychosis or anything, but it's evident that he still doesn't have all his issues worked out. Clearly, judging by where he spends his nights. Which is why he's so often caught in a 1,000-yard stare. It almost seems like he's stuck in a state of shock that he never fully recovered from. He's not continually shut off, but he's consistently stuck in neutral. This Bruce Wayne may be psychologically damaged, but he also exists outside of his own mental torture. When he's not deep in thought or lost in his own misery, this Bruce Wayne could be cunning and clever, an intellectual competitor to business tycoons and crazed clowns alike. He could also come off as charming to many of the women in his life, though often that's not really by design. What is very evident, however, is that this Bruce Wayne is a good guy, something that's clear even from afar. He barely has a public presence to speak of, and yet all of it's wrapped up in goodwill, a far cry from the public persona a lot of us are used to now. I spoke earlier about the problems a lot of people seem to have with his physical appearance, thinking that he wasn't threatening looking enough to portray Batman, but I think that's actually more of a positive than it is a negative. He looks completely unsuspecting. An unidentifiable, everyday guy. And I think that's sort of perfect for a secret identity. If he doesn't look like he could be Batman without the mask on, then good, because no one's supposed to know that he's Batman when he doesn't have the mask on. This is a good thing, not a bad thing.
I see this as an absolute win.
As always, Bruce Wayne is Mr. No Days Off. He's so consumed with working and looking after others that it's easy for him to forget to look after himself. You really get the feeling that Alfred is an absolute necessity in Bruce's life, as he mindlessly goes about his mission day in and day out. While Batman tends to Gotham, it's Alfred that tends to Batman. It goes beyond just doing his job. He clearly cares for Bruce, and he takes care of Bruce more than Bruce cares for or takes care of himself. I think this Alfred really serves as what grounds this Batman to reality. Without Alfred's constant interference and subtle guidance, I really think this Bruce would go off the deep end. He clearly wouldn't look after himself the way that he should, and would probably be far less inclined to engage with the general public. When left to his own devices, Bruce neglects his basic needs. These movies paint a picture that Alfred is sort of this unseen pillar that keeps Wayne Manor intact. Make no mistake, despite the quest for justice and a request for normality, there is nothing that isn't abnormal about this Batman's life. Case in point would probably be the general dysfunction of this Batman's love life. In Batman 89, we see Bruce and Vicky Vale try to make things work. Despite their obvious feelings for each other, Bruce's need for privacy pushes Vicky away. When he finally comes clean and tells her the truth, she has a better understanding of the situation, but ultimately, it just doesn't work out. Bruce's double life scares her, and his honesty about his secret life provides very little comfort. It almost feels like this relationship was doomed from the start. Vicky was just too different. She was too, well, for lack of a better word, normal. She was white picket fences, and he was a dark and gothic castle. Not exactly a winning combination. When he does finally meet someone on the same spectrum as him, it's Lena Kyle, an equally damaged individual with dueling identities, a costume counterpart just as wrapped up in chaos. If Vicky and Bruce's relationship failed because the two were too different, then this one failed because the two were very much the same. I mean, sure, yeah, they had conflicting moral compasses, but they were both two headstrong people with very large personalities created by traumatic events. It's almost as if that's what drew them to each other. They subconsciously sensed it. The two actors had an absolutely incredible amount of chemistry that has never truly been duplicated. I can understand people who say this isn't their Batman, and I can understand people who say this isn't their Catwoman, but I can absolutely not understand people who say this isn't their Batman and Catwoman. As far as I'm concerned, this is without question the definitive pairing of the two. It has never been this good before, and it will never be this good again. They were instantly iconic. I have a lot more to say about this pairing, but perhaps that's better saved for a Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman video in the future. I think a lot of what works with the duality of this character has to do with presentation and perception. One of the greatest elements of the first film was how it showcased Batman and Bruce Wayne, letting the audience get to know Bruce Wayne as they were slowly figuring out Batman. There's a much more relaxed feeling when the story follows Bruce Wayne. You're able to gauge his perspective and gain some sort of insight as to how he thinks and feels. Now, in contrast to that, a lot of the time when we're shown Batman, we're not shown Batman from his own accounts. We're shown Batman through the eyes of others. Not always, but enough of the time. I think this is an incredibly smart move that distanced the audience from the actual character. This way, we're just as enthralled seeing Batman leap into action as the criminals he comes up against. I mean, we're provided much more comfort than them, as we're not going to be making a hospital visit, but, you know. On the subject of Batman, I also want to compliment the way these movies handle the character. While this Batman beats up and brutalizes the bad guys he comes across, he's not some hyper-aggressive hero. He's shown to use his brain just as much as his brawn, investigating problems and coming up with solutions, aiding the public in surviving the Joker's chemical warfare, hacking hardware to reveal corrupt politicians to the city's citizens. He's not just some one-trick baddie. He does it all, and he does it all for the right reasons. I think Tim Burton and Michael Keaton deserve all the credit in the world for recreating and, more importantly, revitalizing this character and the brand. It's because of them and the success of these films that the character got to publicly evolve into the icon he is today. Even if this isn't your Batman, this is the performance that paved the way and served as a blueprint for nearly every Batman to come out since then. I'm not saying every performance after Keaton has been trying to replicate him, but I am saying that this particular performance definitely re-established who Batman is in general. And everyone who has ever played Batman after him has played a version of Batman that has Keaton's Batman ingrained in their DNA. What I can say with complete certainty is that more than any other Batman, I always looked forward to seeing this one. Mask on or mask off. That may not sound like high praise, but let me just go down the list for you. You got Val Kilmer, good Bruce Wayne, a little goofier on the Batman side of things. George Clooney, terrible all around, don't want to talk about him. Christian Bale, incredible Bruce Wayne, horrible Batman. Robert Pattinson, great Batman, no Bruce Wayne. Ben Affleck, great Bruce Wayne, good Batman, horrible writing. Michael Keaton, all around great. However, while this may very well be peak Batman, this Batman is not perfect by any means, because as I've said before, Batman doesn't kill. Now, I will give some leeway. I think that an exception to the rule could be valid. If you put Batman in a certain situation where he's pressed for time and stuck in a no-win situation, other lives are at stake, I do think that Batman would reluctantly take a life to save millions of others, yes. However, this Batman killed these thugs with no hesitation, even when he wasn't in a race against the clock. I know there are some diehards out there that really want to save this and say, oh, well, we didn't see on screen if they died. Him being an attempted murderer does not make him any better. That just means he would have murdered them, but he was bad at it. If the intent is there, then it breaks the rule. The rule isn't Batman doesn't successfully kill, it's that Batman does not attempt to kill. So we're just gonna have to accept it, okay? This Batman kills. I wouldn't say that he's a cold-blooded killer. He's not brutalizing every bad guy that he comes across, but he picks and chooses the punishments that he deals out. Every new case is an individual case that he handles differently. There is no singular Batman beatdown formula. There's no rhyme or reason for this Batman's punishments. He just dishes out whatever he sees fit in that present moment. Which looks cool, but, you know, just doesn't feel very Batman-y. Batman should hold the value of life exceptionally higher. Because ultimately, despite being a very skilled fighter, Batman doesn't want to hurt people. He wants to heal them. I mean, sure, yeah, he'll break both your arms to do so, but there are limits to this thing. This Batman is blowing up discount Bam Bam Bigelow, having flame swallowers be swallowed by flames, and willingly and intentionally killing bad birthday party entertainers. This is a pretty big no-no. The antithesis of what this character stands for, and yet despite that, I still think Michael Keaton's Batman is one of the greatest Batmen to ever grace the big screen. For me, there are problems with this version of Batman, but Michael Keaton is none of them. This isn't just one of the greatest Batman performances of all time. This is one of the greatest comic book movie performances of all time. Quite frankly, no hyperbole here, I truly believe, without Tim Burton and Michael Keaton, the Batman we know wouldn't be the Batman we know today. Last year I made a video about Michael Keaton's time as Batman. Now that video was made in preparation to see him reprise the role in the next upcoming superhero outings. But both his world and our world have changed significantly since then, and we've now probably seen what is likely all we'll ever see as him as the character. So with that in mind, I'd like to reflect on how this character has evolved, and in some cases, devolved, since Tim Burton's Batman and Batman Returns. I made mention of Bruce feeling a lot like a recluse. Not one to go out and mingle, if even for the sake of gaining intel and espionage. He kept to himself, staying in the shadows in and out of the mask. In many ways, his father figure and butler, Alfred, was all that gave him some sort of social life, insisting that he go out, supporting Batman but trying to bring back Bruce Wayne. I made mention of how important this relationship is to the character, and both sides of that character, and how with the absence of this Alfred, this Bruce Wayne would live life in self-appointed isolation. And that point was pretty much proved by the Flash movie. The movie showcases a much more mature Bruce. Chronologically speaking.
Older.
This is a post-Batman Bruce Wayne, a hero turned hermit who keeps to himself. No real relationships to speak of. A man living out his days until he has no days left to live. He's a person with no point and no purpose. Having avenged his family's death in taking the life that took theirs, cleaning up the city that they once lived in, now Bruce is stuck in the tattered remains of reality after his mission is complete. This sentiment is echoed when he says,
I lost my parents. That pain made me who I am. I'm not sure I know who I am without it, actually.
His life was solely centered around the lives that he lost, and without the guidance of Alfred, there's nothing left, and he's left with nothing. Which is why on the battlefield, Batman chooses to sacrifice himself, continually, almost as a means to an end, to live and die a hero and no longer be burdened by life. That's how I read it anyway. It's a sad conclusion to a character who's been tried through tragic origins, making it an unfortunate but fitting follow-up.
We can't bring you back, can we? You already did.
It's also worth noting that after Bruce takes his final fall, Flash attempts to unmask the hero, but instead he chooses to die under the cowl, which is a perfectly poetic ending for the hero, dying the way that he lived, as Batman. Because in the end, that's who he was. Whether he was in or out of the mask, whether he was amongst others or all alone, whether he was still active in his criminal crime-fighting career, or allegedly retired, he was always Batman. He bonds with Barry over their similar shared stories of lost loved ones, which was nice to see. This Batman not only never took on a Robin, but never so much as worked alongside anyone aside from Alfred. Even his cohorts like Commissioner Gordon are kept at arm's length.
What was kind of fun was that Michael Keaton's Bruce / Batman had never been a mentor. He'd always been a lone wolf. We'd never got to see him with a Robin.
So seeing him work alongside a pseudo-protege was an unforeseen insight into what kind of dynamic a dynamic duo in that universe might have had. It's an added layer to this portrayal, and something new for this version of the character. The movie depicts him as reluctant, but not entirely unwilling to work with others. Some people aren't so fond of this portrayal, calling Keaton's performance lackluster and bored. But Batman in general, and his Batman especially, have always been stoic. He sounds no different than he did the last time he put on the cowl, albeit maybe a bit raspier. The delivery hasn't changed, and it hasn't needed to. I think Keaton was as good as he's ever been here. Even if you don't like the movie, and many didn't, I think most should be able to appreciate the part that he plays in it. A lot of time people criticize his line delivery, specifically this one.
Yeah. I'm Batman.
But I don't think that they're understanding the context of that line and why he says it the way he says it. You see, in the original, he says this as a threat.
I want you to tell all your friends about me.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
But in the context of this universe, and ours as well, that line has become so iconic of the vigilante. A fact made clear when this Flash learns of this Batman.
I'm Batman.
You. What did you just say?
I'm Batman.
So when he's saying this is coming from an old and tired Batman who's had to say that phrase God knows how many times at this point in his life. And he is over it. As a matter of fact, he's over being Batman, because he's kind of being Batman reluctantly. He's also not thrilled to be teaming up with these two. Following this line, he literally tells them that he will only get them to Superman, but from that point on, they're on their own. He's not trying to make an entrance and introduction. He's literally just saying, yeah, I'm Batman. Alright, let's get past this. So, this...
I'm Batman.
...was never meant to be this.
I'm Batman.
It might be the same line, but there's a different meaning behind why it's being said. However, having said that, I think that we can all agree that both of these are much better than this.
I freeze. I'm Batman.
One of the things I appreciate the most out of this return is the window dressing surrounding it, with the Flash movie making mention of Bruce's past appearances, and even staying true to the character's clearly outdated style, making sure that this Bruce Wayne, even when he's at his most homeless looking, is fitted with his finest ascot. Fred from Scooby-Doo, eat your heart out. It even managed to put him back in his mechanic suit. And you gotta love that. Having said all that, as much as I love this in concept, and a good amount of the time in execution, there are still some critiques I have. For one, I don't buy the notion that Batman fights for truth and justice only within the perimeters of Gotham City. I don't buy that his mission can in fact end at all. I know that Gotham City is his home and his #1 priority, but justice doesn't stop there. Even saying something as simple as Bruce got too old and injured to put on the cape and cowl would have made for a much better story, because it would define the unbreakable spirit of Batman, in juxtaposition to the very breakable body of Bruce Wayne. Bruce wouldn't willingly give up the mantle, unless he absolutely had to. So to me, that story would better benefit the character. Though judging by the deleted scenes, it seems like the actual story behind this motive is a lot darker.
I heard this rumor about him killing a dude in front of his kid. Maybe that's why he quit. But why does this guy know so much about time travel?
Maybe he's trying to fix it.
I don't hate the idea of Batman attempting time travel to undo a mistake, but I think that that's too big of a mistake for him to make. Batman doesn't kill, even though this one kinda did. And also, he does a lot in this line of films. But Batman especially wouldn't kill a man in front of his family. His family was killed in front of him. I get that this is done intentionally, I understand the narrative, but it's a bad image to set for Batman. Let alone Michael Keaton's return to the role. Thank God this plot point was dropped on the cutting room floor. We're already coming out of a line of films that saw Batman assault a criminal in an alleyway in front of his child. I don't think I need to say why Batman, a man who watched his parents be murdered in an alleyway in front of his very eyes, would not do something like that. A better narrative might have been Bruce attempting to go back in time trying to save his parents. If you have to do the time travel story, I think that that one might fit a little bit better. And you also do it without completely destroying the sanctity of that character. I hate the actual narrative that they were going to go with because it does a disservice to the character, completely contradicting the more than serviceable work that Michael Keaton was putting in. However, while I'm glad that they didn't use this narrative thread, or spaghetti strand depending on how you choose to look at things, I would have liked to have it replaced with something. The absence of this leaves more holes in the plot than anything else. Why does Bruce Wayne know how time travel works? What was his actual reason for retiring from the role? And why would he be so unwilling to help for the greater good? Also, aesthetically, I have some complaints as well. Not with the suit itself, because I actually in a lot of ways thought that it was an upgrade. Each movie with this Batman has kept the same basic design, but made minor adjustments here and there to better suit it. Here they decided to lose the rubber abs, because honestly, what does that do? But I don't think that they paid enough attention to how they were choosing to light Batman. He always seemed larger than life in those first two films because they kept the costume in mind when lighting a scene, or even when writing a scene. The character was usually accompanied by darkness, which allowed him to blend in better, but also highlighted the character's mystique. Whereas in this movie, they just decided to show him in broad daylight most of the time, and that did nobody any favors. He feels a little out of place here from time to time. I just don't feel like this suit was one that was ever meant to be out in the sun. And also, like the lighting, I think the camera angles aren't always as flattering as they should be. I've never wanted to see Bruce's nose through his Batman mask. How this was not figured out and at the very least fixed in post is far beyond me. It's just not a good look. We're seeing way too much of the man, and when the costume's on him, you want to see more Bat. He goes from feeling larger than life to feeling like cosplay. Despite its somewhat shortcomings, I do cherish the extra time we got with Michael Keaton. It's sad to see that it was so short-lived, as initially there were plans of Keaton to continue on as this universe's Batman, at least for a time being, making a cameo in Aquaman 2, and even co-starring in the now-cancelled Batgirl movie. There were even some whispers of a potential Batman Beyond movie somewhere down the line. Some photos have leaked online showing sneak peeks of what we'll now never see, and it's really unfortunate that he'll never wear that cape and cowl again. But regardless, it's pretty great that he got to wear it a third time. I will mourn what we lost, but appreciate what we got. Michael Keaton is still a great caped crusader, and will probably always be one of, if not the most beloved Batman of the big screen. So with all that being said, if you like this video and would maybe be interested in seeing a video on another Michael Keaton related movie, that being Birdman, a movie I myself have yet to see, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
Michael Keaton is Batman to me.
I am vengeance. I am the night. And that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.